Golden Tales.
The crisp autumn air settled over the village like a gentle sigh, rustling golden leaves along the narrow cobblestone streets. This small settlement had weathered centuries of change, yet retained a calm that felt almost timeless. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, as stories or, at least, thought they did. In the heart of the village stood the old post office, a modest brick building crowned with a faded wooden sign swinging softly in the wind. The scent of aged paper and ink lingered inside, a silent testament to the countless messages that had passed through its doors. Mrs. Evelyn Parker, the postmistress, was a woman of unwavering routine and quiet strength. Her silver-streaked hair was always neatly pinned back, and her keen eyes, framed by delicate wrinkles, held both warmth and wisdom. She had served this village for over 40 years, her hands steady as she sorted letters, her heart quietly carrying the weight of the lives they touched. One particularly gray morning, as clouds gathered like heavy curtains over the hills, a parcel arrived at the post office. It was unlike any other, a bulky, worn box, sealed with frayed twine. There was no return address, only a single name scripted elegantly on the faded label: Captain James Hartley. The name sent a ripple through the post office, stirring memories long buried. James Hartley had been a young man from the village, spirited and hopeful, who had enlisted at the outbreak of the war decades ago. He had written letters home, letters full of dreams and fears. But then, silence. Years had passed with no word of James. Some whispered he had fallen in battle, others that he had vanished without trace, swallowed by the chaos of war. Clara, had waited for news that never came, holding on to hope as the seasons changed and the village moved on. Evelyn carefully lifted the box onto the counter, her fingers trembling slightly as she untied the fragile twine. Inside lay bundles of letters, tied with a faded blue ribbon, their edges worn and yellowed by time. Each envelope bore James's careful handwriting, addressed to Clara, never sent. As Evelyn unfolded the first letter, the ink blurred with age, but the words emerged clearly, a voice from the past, filled with longing, love, and the unbearable ache of separation. The letter spoke of dreams for a future they would never share, of a soldier's loneliness in foreign lands, and a heart that beat only for the woman waiting at home. For a long moment, the post office was silent except for the soft rustle of paper and the distant call of a lone crow. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying with it the whispers of forgotten promises and unfinished stories. Evelyn looked out the window, her eyes misting. She knew these letters were more than just paper. They were a bridge between two worlds, a connection that had defied time and tragedy. And now, they had finally come home. Clara Morgan lived in a modest cottage on the edge of the village, where the hills rolled gently into the horizon, and silence felt like a second skin. The years had changed. Her silver now streaked through her once jet-black hair, and her eyes, once alive with fire, now carried the stillness of someone who had learned to live without answers. Her house was neat, almost too neat. Every book on the shelf had its place. Every teacup was turned just right. It was as if the routine, the order, kept the chaos of her memories at bay. In the small living room, a faded photograph of James rested on the mantel, encased in an antique frame. He was smiling in uniform, full of life and promise. She never moved that picture. She dusted around it. It had been nearly 40 years since the last letter arrived, and that one had only said, "I'm being transferred to a location I can name. I'll write again soon." But he never did. No body, no funeral, just silence. And over the years, people had told her to move on. "He would have wanted you to be happy. It's been long enough." But Clara never responded. Because some wounds do not heal with time, they simply grow quiet. That morning, Evelyn Parker walked up the narrow garden path toward Clara's house, the heavy box of letters pressed to her chest. Her fingers were still trembling from what she had read. The wind stirred the chimes by Clara's door, their melody faint, almost melancholic. Clara opened the door slowly, dressed in her usual cardigan and long skirt, her expression unreadable. Evelyn, usually composed, found herself unable to speak for a moment. Instead, she simply handed the box forward. "These were sent to you," Evelyn finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Clara looked down at the box, her eyes narrowed slowly, fixating on the name written on the side: Captain James Hartley. For a brief moment, her breath caught in her throat. Her hand reached out, hesitant, as though afraid the box might vanish like a ghost if touched too quickly. She did not say a word. She only nodded once, her lips pressed tightly together, and carried the box inside. Evelyn remained at the gate, not wanting to intrude on what was clearly something sacred. Through the window, she saw Clara set the box on the dining table. She watched her fingers untie the twine, as if opening something holy, and then the door closed. Inside, Clara sat in silence. She did not reach for the letters immediately. Instead, she simply stared at them. The room felt heavier now, as if James himself had stepped into it, bringing the weight of all those lost years with him. Her fingers finally moved. She picked up the first letter. The paper crackled in her hands. She opened it, and for the first time in decades, she heard his voice again. She did not cry, not yet, but her hands began to tremble. Clara's hands trembled as she opened the wooden box. Inside, tied together with a faded blue ribbon, lay dozens of letters. Each envelope was carefully sealed, untouched by time. The ink on the covers was still strong, the handwriting unmistakable. James Hartley. Her breath caught. She took the first letter and slowly unfolded it. The paper was delicate, but the words written on it carried the weight of 1,000 days. My dearest Clara, I watched the sunset today, and for a moment, it looked like the one we saw in Devon that summer. I remembered the way you laughed when the waves nearly stole your shoes. That memory is all I have tonight. Each letter was filled with longing. In the early ones, he was hopeful, dreaming of a future. He described the cold nights in the trenches, the stolen moments of peace, the way he carried her picture in the pocket of his uniform. But as the pages went on, his tone changed. The war is getting darker, Clara. I do not know if I will make it back. But if I do not, please know that every heartbeat I had left was yours. Clara could barely keep reading. Each word felt like a ghost brushing against her skin. Letter after letter and sent, unread, unloved, until now. She realized something devastating. He had written these letters, but had never posted them. Had he meant to, or was he afraid? At the very bottom of the box, there was one letter that stood apart. It was different. It had been opened. The paper was worn, as if it had been read many times before. It was addressed, not to her, but to someone named Henry Beaumont. Clara's heart stopped. Who was Henry? And why had James written to him, not her? She read the first line. If anything should happen to me, please deliver the enclosed letters to Clara Whitmore. She deserves to know she was loved. Tears blurred her vision. She now understood. James had entrusted someone with his final wish, but the letters had never come. For decades, she had believed he had forgotten her, but he had not. He had written every word for her, and someone had failed to keep a promise. Her grief turned into something else. A quiet fire. She would find out what happened. She would learn who Henry Beaumont was. Because James had not abandoned her. He had tried to come home, and someone had taken that away. Clara's hands shook as she reached inside the old wooden box. There, tied with a worn blue ribbon, was a bundle of letters, dozens of them, untouched, unread, waiting. Each envelope had the same name written in familiar cursive, James Hartley. She sat down slowly, the silence of the attic pressing in on her. With trembling fingers, she opened the first one. My beloved Clara, tonight, the stars reminded me of the ones we watched on that hill in Devon. Do you remember? You fell asleep on my shoulder, and I did not move an inch. I wanted to hold that moment forever. Her breath caught. The words felt like whispers from another life. Letter after letter unfolded stories of longing and love. In the early ones, James was light-hearted, hopeful. He talked about the boys in his unit, the smell of damp earth, the way he dreamed of her every night. But over time, his tone changed. Clara, I fear I may not return, but if I do not, let this truth remain. I have loved you with everything I have. You were my calm in the chaos. The ink blurred slightly under her tears. For years, she had thought James had forgotten her, but he had been writing to her all along. She reached the last letter in the stack. It was different. A small note was attached to it, yellowed with age, the handwriting unfamiliar. If found, please deliver these letters to Miss Clara Whitmore. She must know the truth. H.B. Clara's heart skipped a beat. H.B. The initials echoed in her mind like a bell. She turned over the final letter. It was addressed not to her, but to someone named Henry Beaumont. The name meant nothing to her, yet everything about it felt wrong. She read the letter carefully. Henry, I am entrusting you with this. If I do not make it home, please give these to Clara. She must know I never stopped loving her. She sat frozen. Henry had failed him. Or worse, James had done everything he could to reach her, and someone had stood in the way. The ache in Clara's chest twisted into something sharp. She had mourned a silence that was never his fault. Now, she needed to know who Henry Beaumont was, and why he had kept James's final words hidden for a lifetime. Clara did not sleep that night. The name Henry Beaumont was no longer just a signature at the bottom of a forgotten letter. It was a thread pulled from a tapestry she had never known existed. And now that thread was unraveling something much larger. She sat in her study wrapped in a blanket, the window slightly open, as rain tapped against the glass. The letter still lay on the desk. Her eyes kept drifting back to the ink, the loops of his handwriting, as if they might rearrange themselves into a new message. Who was Henry Beaumont really? The name felt like a whisper from a lifetime ago, a distant memory tugging at the edge of consciousness. She thought back, childhood, holidays, long tables, distant relatives, a man with a sharp suit and a quiet voice who stood in the corner of family photos but whose name had always escaped her. She rose and walked to the hallway closet. Her fingers trembled as she pulled down a heavy cardboard box labeled family stuff in red marker. It smelled of dust and dried time. Inside were old photo albums, tax records, faded Christmas cards, and near the bottom a leather-bound book. Her family tree. She opened it slowly, the pages delicate with age, generations of names dated in neat cursive. And then there it was, Henry Beaumont, born 1923, died 1986. Next to his name, a small, grainy photograph paper-clipped to the page. She held it up to the light. He was younger than she remembered, tall, thin, with deep-set eyes. A small smile played on his lips, but it looked forced, posed, like he had been asked to smile but did not quite know. How a chilling thought settled in her chest. Why had he kept those letters? Why had he never said a word? At the back of the book, tucked into a folded envelope, was a single note in that same cursive: "I did what I thought was right." Clara stared at it as if the ink might disappear if she blinked. What had he thought was right? What secret had he carried until his death? She returned to her desk and opened one of the albums from the 1970s. There were dozens of pictures from her childhood, birthday parties, family trips, and one in particular caught her breath, a photo of her 6th birthday. She was sitting on her mother's lap, laughing with cake on her cheek. Her father stood behind them, beaming, and off to the side, almost out of frame, was him, Henry. He was looking at her, but not smiling. His face was pale, his eyes fixed on her like he was memorizing her, as if afraid he might forget. Clara's hands shook. He knew. He must have known something that no one else would speak about. Something about her. About James. She picked up her phone and dialed her father's care home. The night nurse answered, sleepy and courteous. Yes, Mr. Avery was fine, resting. She asked if she could visit tomorrow morning, earlier than usual. The nurse agreed. Clara hung up and leaned back in her chair. The storm outside had grown wilder, the wind howling like a warning. She felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, and the past was rising up to meet her. Tomorrow, she would look her father in the eye and ask him the questions she had never dared to voice. No more silence, no more secrets, only truth. The morning was pale and quiet when Clara arrived at the care home. The rain had passed, but the sky was still heavy with clouds. A gray curtain hung over the world, as if the day itself understood the weight of what was coming. She carried the family tree book in one hand and the photograph in the other. The receptionist smiled at her kindly, but she barely noticed. Her steps felt measured, her breath shallow. She was not just visiting her father, she was confronting a silence that had lasted decades. Mr. Avery was in his chair by the window, his eyes closed, his face soft with sleep. Time had carved gentle lines into his skin, but his presence still held a certain strength. Even now, Clara pulled a chair beside him and sat down slowly. "Dad," she whispered. He stirred gently, opened his eyes slowly, and smiled faintly. "Clara, darling, so early." She smiled, but it was a careful smile. "I needed to talk to you about something important." He blinked slowly, of course. She laid the photograph in his lap. "Do you remember him?" He looked down and stared at the image for a long time, longer than she expected. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and fragile. "Henry Beaumont." Clara nodded. "He knew something about James, about me, did he not?" Her father closed his eyes for a moment and his chin trembled. When he spoke again, his voice was nearly a whisper. "You were never supposed to know." Clara sat still, letting the words come. "Henry was not just a relative. He was more complicated than that. He was my cousin, but also my friend. And he was in love with your mother." Clara's heart skipped a beat. "What?" He looked at her now, eyes clouded, not just by age, but by memory. "They grew up together. She chose me, but he never let it go. He was always around, always watching. When James was born, Henry became different, distant, but not gone. Clara swallowed hard. You think he believed James was his son? A long silence hung between them. I know he did, her father said finally. But he was wrong. Your mother never strayed. She was loyal. But Henry could not accept that. He took that belief with him to the grave. Clara looked down at her hands. He saved James's letters. All of them. Why? Her father's voice grew shaky, because despite everything, he loved him, even if he was not his. And maybe part of him hoped that, if anything ever happened to us, he would have a piece of what he always wanted. Clara could not stop the tears now. All this time I thought I was missing a piece of James, and it was sitting in Henry's drawer. Her father reached for her hand. I was trying to protect you. From the pain. From the complexity. Life is rarely simple, Clara. She pulled her hand away gently. But I deserved the truth. I am not a child anymore. And James deserved to be remembered fully, not filtered. He looked away, then back at her. Slowly, you are right. I was wrong. I am sorry. Clara stood up quietly. I forgive you. But I need time. And I need to know everything. No more silence. He nodded slowly, and Clara saw something shift in his face. Relief, as if the secret had been a weight on his chest for years, and now finally he could breathe. She walked out into the gray morning, the photograph still in her hand. James's story was not finished, and neither was hers. Clara opened the old cassette recorder with trembling fingers. She had waited days since visiting her father, unsure if she was ready. But the silence in her apartment was too loud now. She placed the first tape in the player, the one with a date written in James's handwriting just months before he died. She pressed play. There was a soft click, a gentle static, then his voice. Hey Clara, if you are hearing this, then I guess I am gone. Her breath caught in her throat. I never knew how to say things out loud. When I was with you, so I put them here. His voice was calm but full of that familiar energy that made him seem alive again. You were the only one who ever truly saw me. Even when I was a mess, especially then. She closed her eyes, letting the sound wrap around her. I knew I would not last long. I felt it even back then. Something was not right in me, but you made it better. You gave me something like peace. There was a pause, and she heard him sigh. I hope you forgive me for leaving so much unsaid, but know this, you were my family, my home, you still are. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but she did not stop the tape. I left these tapes for you because I want you to remember me fully, not just the sad parts, the real me, the laughter, the fights, the stupid inside jokes we had that time. We got lost in the mountains, and you yelled at me for hours, but still shared your sandwich. Clara laughed through her tears. You were always stronger than me, Clara, and smarter you are. Gone, nah, do great things, I know it. The tape ended with a soft click, but James's voice remained inside her. She sat in silence for a long time, then picked up the family tree book, and began writing again. But this time she did not just write names and dates. She wrote stories, memories. She wrote James's favorite song, his terrible sense of direction, his fear of dogs, the way he used to hum when he was nervous. She wrote the truth, because the dead deserved to be remembered, not just as they were lost, but as they lived. And Clara, she was done being silent.